He slammed the table and said, "Martial arts don't work in the real world." Then, in the space of a single breath, he learned how wrong he was. That moment wasn't about me, it was about an idea he believed. A story he'd told himself. He saw the speed, the reaction, the conclusion. The 7 seconds that ended the conflict. What he didn't see, what almost no one sees, are the years that led to those seconds and the philosophy that governed them. The year was 1972, or perhaps it was 73. My memory for exact dates fades, but the feeling of that Los Angeles night, the texture of the air heavy with possibility and perfume, remains etched in my senses. My wife had convinced me to go out. "You live in 2 rooms," she told me that morning. "The film set and the training hall. The world is bigger than that. Remember how to be just a person for one night." She was right, of course. She had a way of seeing the cages I built for myself, so when a producer friend called inviting me to discuss a potential role at a lounge on the Sunset Strip, I agreed. A business meeting in a social setting. It seemed a reasonable compromise. In hindsight, I should have insisted on a quiet cafe. But life, I've learned, often teaches its lessons in the places we least expect. The drive there was a spectacle of light and shadow. Neon signs bled their colors onto wet pavement. The Strip was a living organism, pulsing with a desperate energy. I parked and approached the entrance, a velvet rope held by another man in a black shirt. The bass from inside wasn't just heard, it was felt in the chest, a second heartbeat for the building. I gave my friend's name and was waved in. The transition was abrupt. From the cool night into a wall of heat, sound, and humanity. The place was a capsule of distilled energy. A low, smoky ceiling trapped the noise, reflecting it back down upon us. Strobing lights, red, then blue, then a sickly green, cut the darkness into jagged, moving pieces, making people appear as ghosts in a machine. I moved inward, not pushing against the tide of bodies, but letting it part around me. When you understand movement, you don't fight the current. You become aware of its rhythm, its pressures and releases, and you find the path it leaves. It is not magic, but physics married to awareness. My immediate focus was on finding my contact, but a deeper, older part of my mind was already at work, reading the room. It's a sense you develop, not unlike a sailor feeling a shift in the wind. It was the scent, spilled liquor, cheap cologne, and beneath it all, the subtle metallic scent of simmering pride. I had known this atmosphere before, in the back alley gambling dens of Hong Kong where a wrong look could cost you, in Oakland pool halls where tension hung thicker than smoke. It has a pattern, a predictable rhythm. Ego and alcohol in a dark room are a familiar volatile recipe. Then I saw him. A mountain of a man stationed near the entrance, arms folded over a security shirt that strained at the seams. He wasn't merely watching the crowd, his gaze was hunting. It scanned, assessed, categorized, looking for weakness, for a spark to extinguish or fan into a problem he could handle. Our eyes met for a fragment of a second, a silent exchange of data. I looked past him, breaking the connection. No need to plant a seed where you don't intend to grow a tree. I found my friend in a corner booth, partially shielded by a potted fern. He waved me over. We shouted pleasantries and then about script changes, shooting schedules, the mechanics of make-believe. I nodded. I smiled. I pretended to catch every third word over the relentless bass, but my awareness was split. That familiar prickling feeling settled on the back of my neck. The sensation you get when you're being measured. Not by the room at large, but by a single focused point of attention. It is a weight. I glanced casually toward the entrance. The big man hadn't stopped looking. It wasn't personal hatred, it was colder than that, calculation. The look that asks a silent, persistent question, are the stories true? I excused myself, pointing toward the restroom, needing a moment away from the noise and that gaze. The hallway to the restrooms was a narrow, pulsing artery, lit by a single flickering bulb. The music was muffled here, replaced by the close sound of breathing and the shuffle of feet. As I turned to go back, he was there. Not by accident. He had moved with purpose. He leaned against the wall, one foot propped up, blocking the way just enough to be a statement, not yet an outright barrier. A half-smile played on his lips, devoid of warmth. "You're that guy," he said. It wasn't a question, it was an identification, a label slapped down between us. "I am," I replied, keeping my voice calm, level. I kept my posture soft, my hands open and visible at my sides. There is an art to appearing non-threatening when you are, in fact, most capable. It is the art of confidence so deep it no longer needs to announce itself. The Kung Fu teacher. He said it like it was a punchline to a joke I hadn't heard. A smirk tugged at his mouth. "My friends over there," he nodded with his chin toward a cluster of similarly large men at the bar. "We were just talking. We think what you do. It's all for show." He paused, letting the accusation hang in the thick air. That in a real situation with no rules, it would just fall apart. He took a long, slow swig of his beer, his eyes never leaving mine. "You can't handle actual violence." There it was, the challenge. I had heard it in a dozen dialects, from San Francisco to Singapore. The same core insecurity, the same doubt, always dressed up as a test for me, but really it was a test for themselves. The music from the main room thumped on, a distant heartbeat. Laughter echoed, a world away. Here in this tight, dim passage, the air grew still and heavy. I had choices then, as we always do. I could laugh it off, make a joke, turn and walk away. That is often the strongest move, the one that requires the most security. I could argue, try to explain the philosophy he was so casually mocking. The discipline, the self-knowledge, the way of water. That would have been useless. His mind was not open to a lesson, it was primed for a reaction. He wanted anger, or fear, or bluster. So I decided to give him a third thing, something he hadn't prepared for. "You may have a point," I said. His smile vanished. The rehearsed script in his head faltered. He hadn't expected agreement. Confusion flickered in his eyes. "Training halls have rules," I continued, my voice level, almost conversational, as if we were discussing the weather. "Mats, referees, boundaries. The street," I gestured slightly around the narrow hallway, "has none. They are different worlds, with different purposes." I took a small, smooth step to the side, offering a physical path, giving him a clear exit from the confrontation game he had initiated. Real violence isn't about who is tougher. It's about ending a threat. Quickly, efficiently, nothing more. I moved to pass him, my body angled politely. His hand shot out fast for a big man, a meaty palm planting firmly against my sternum, stopping me cold. "I'm not done talking to you." And there, with that touch, the entire equation changed. Time didn't slow down dramatically, as in the movies. Instead, my awareness sharpened, intensified. My mind didn't race, it clarified. I became hyper-aware of discrete data points. The exact pressure and angle of his hand against my chest, the locked tension in his elbow, the way his weight had shifted too far forward onto the balls of his feet, committing him to the push. The stale, hoppy smell of beer on his breath. The fact that his friends at the bar had fallen silent, watching intently from a distance. I didn't push back against his shove. I simply stood, rooted, letting him feel the unyielding solidity of my stance. It was a message in itself. A wall pushes back, water finds a new path. "I don't want any trouble," I said, my voice even quieter now, forcing him to listen closely. "I'm just here to meet a friend. That's all. You think you're better than me?" His voice rose in volume, a performer seeking a larger audience. A few people passing by glanced our way, sensing the shift in tone. "I don't think that at all," I said, keeping my gaze steady. "But you're putting your hands on me. Why?" I asked. "What do you want from this?" The question, so plain and direct, seemed to short-circuit his aggression. He had no real answer, no deeper grievance. The why had never occurred to him. The action was its own reason. His jaw tightened. "Because I can," he grunted and shoved harder, putting his shoulder into it. As the increased force traveled down his arm, my own hand came up. Not in a strike, but in a flowing, upward motion that tracked along the inside of his arm, redirecting its line of force harmlessly past my shoulder. It was a simple, fundamental deflection, the first principle of managing incoming energy. His balance teetered for an instant. He had to adjust his footing. "Please," I said, the word firm, not pleading. "Don't." His face darkened, the blood rising beneath his skin. The performative smirk was gone, completely erased and replaced by raw, unfiltered irritation. The real insult had just been delivered. I had moved his arm. I had, in front of his audience, negated his considerable strength without apparent effort, without strain. I had made his power seem irrelevant. That was the unforgivable thing. With deliberate slowness, he bent and carefully set his beer bottle down on the floor. It was theater, a dramatic beat to signal a new act. "You just made a big mistake," he said, the words low and gravelly. I took another step back, creating a few more precious inches of separation. In situations like these, distance is life, distance is time, and time is choice. But the hallway walls were close, pressing in. A small crowd was beginning to gather at either end, drawn like moths to the heat of potential conflict. They were spectators now, an audience that changed the chemistry of the space. "Last chance," I said, my voice dropping into a flat, clear register that carried through the muffled music. "You walk away, I walk away, we forget this happened tonight. You walk away," he spat, the words laced with contempt. "Run back to your movie sets and your fantasy fights." He stepped in, his body telegraphing his intent. His hands came up not in a boxer's stance, but open, ready to grab. He wasn't planning to punch, he wanted to crush, to clinch, to use his overwhelming mass like a blunt weapon. It was all force, no structure. A boulder, not a blade. And a boulder, for all its power, can be avoided. His right hand grabbed a fistful of my jacket near the shoulder. His left reached for my neck. In that split second of his commitment, as his weight surged forward, I didn't retreat. Retreat would have given him the control he sought. Instead, I stepped forward, inside the arc of his reaching arms. My body turned alongside his, a subtle rotation. My fingertips did nothing more than brush the outside of his elbow, a gentle guide that capitalized on the momentum he had already created. It wasn't a pull or a push, but a redirection. He stumbled past me, one heavy off-balance step, thrown forward by the very power he had exerted. He caught himself against the far wall with a heavy thud. "Stop," I said again, my voice like a blade of ice. "This is done. One more chance. Always one more chance." He wheeled around, his face a mask of pure fury now. The last vestiges of control were gone, burned away by public embarrassment. A wild, arcing swing, more a desperate slap than a punch, came hurling toward the side of my head. I didn't block it. Blocking would have been meeting force with force. I simply let my head tilt a few inches to the side. I felt the wind of his fist disturb the air against my cheek, heard the faint whistle of its passage. Someone in the crowd gasped. His own momentum, unchecked, carried him forward, spinning him slightly and exposing his entire left side. The opening was clear, textbook. A single sharp strike to the solar plexus, a knuckle to the floating rib, a palm to the temple. Anyone would have ended it right there. I did not take it. I stepped back again, my feet resetting into a neutral stance. I was giving him space, and in doing so, offering a final fragment of dignity, an opportunity to see the chasm between his intent and his capability. He braced himself against the wall, chest heaving. It wasn't from exertion, we had barely moved, but from the flood of adrenaline, the fight-or-flight chemicals surge with nowhere to go. He had thrown everything he had at the air. His friends at the bar were no longer smiling or cheering, they were silent, watching with uncertain faces. The bubble of quiet around us tightened, a pocket of stillness in the noisy club. "You're quick," he mumbled, the words thick with resentment as if my speed were an unfair trick. "I'm leaving now," I stated, leaving no room for discussion. "Move aside." But the pride, the burning shame, the weight of all those watching eyes, it was too much for him to bear. To back down now would be a humiliation he couldn't absorb. With a guttural grunt, a sound of pure frustration, he lunged a final time. It was a last desperate gamble. Both arms wide, he came to tackle, to engulf, to finally impose his size through sheer messy force. There was no more patience to be had, no more chances to give. My body decided. Years of ingrained repetition, thousands of hours of drilling the same responses, until they were cleaner than thought, finally spoke. My left forearm intercepted his right arm, not with a blunt block, but with a sharp, precise angle that deadened the nerve bundle, causing his grabbing hand to go slack. Simultaneously, my right palm shot forward, stopping a hair's breadth from his throat, not touching, but presenting an undeniable, looming threat. In the same fluid motion, my foot hooked behind his forward ankle. It was a simple, classic, undeniable sweep. The principle of taking away the base. He went down, but not crashing. I guided the fall, controlling his descent with the frame of my own body, so his head met the hard tile floor with a solid thump, not a sickening crack. He lay on his back, staring up at the flickering ceiling light, the breath momentarily knocked from his lungs, his eyes wide with a sudden, brutal clarity. The entire sequence, from his lunge to him on the ground, 7 seconds, maybe 8. The ambient hum of the club, the distant thump of music, the murmur of voices, all rushed back into the void left by the confrontation. He blinked up at me from the floor, dazed. I could see the journey in his eyes, the hot anger cooling into shock and finally crystallizing into a stark, unvarnished understanding. He had been dismantled, not just beaten but systematically taken apart, and yet he was fundamentally unharmed. Bruised pride and a sore back would be his only injuries. I extended my hand down to him, a simple offer. He looked at it as if it were a foreign object, then glanced toward his friends, who made no move to intervene. "Get up," I said, my tone devoid of gloating or anger. "It's finished." He rolled onto his side, avoiding my hand, and pushed himself up to his feet, moving slowly, warily. His hands came up, not in fists, but in a gesture of semi-conscious, wary defense. The fight was gone. He finally understood the reality of the situation. "You could have," he started, the sentence dying in his throat, unable to articulate the obvious. "Yes," I said simply. There was no need to deny it. The truth was his to own now. He swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing. "Why didn't you?" That was it, the only question that had mattered all night, the first and only real thing he had asked. "Because victory," I told him, holding his gaze, "isn't measured in the damage you inflict. It's measured in the restraint you show when you have every reason and every ability to cause it." He just stood there, absorbing the words, the lesson learned not through pain but through a shocking lack of it. I gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod, then turned and walked through the parted crowd, which silently made way. Outside, the cool, smog-tinged night air felt like a baptism. It washed over me, clean and sharp. I sat in my car for a long time, hands resting on the steering wheel, feeling the last echoes of the confrontation's tension drain from my muscles and my mind. My teacher's voice returned to me then, as clear as if he were in the passenger seat. "Little dragon," he would say, "skill without conscience is just clever brutality. Any thug can break a bone. Your task is to be better than that." I understood that truth now in my marrow. I had been like that man once when I was younger and my fire was untempered. In the rooftop fights of Hong Kong, in the chaotic challenges of my youth, I had used my skill as an outlet for frustration, for the anger born of poverty and circumstance. I had won fights, but I had lost pieces of myself in the process. I knew the scar it leaves on the soul, not on the body but on the spirit. A small, hard calcification each time you choose unnecessary force. Tonight, I had added no new scars, not for him, and more importantly, not for me. The real fight, I realized as I finally started the car, was never against the challenger in the bar. That was just a symptom, a shadow. The real fight is the perpetual silent war against the impulse inside yourself. It's the fight against the ego, that whispers to prove a point, to dominate, to humiliate. It's the fight against the part of you that wants to hurt simply because you can, to win the fleeting, empty admiration of strangers at the permanent cost of your own principles. That is the opponent that never leaves. That is the match that is always underway. Every single day is that fight. The dojo, the endless forms, the mind-numbing repetition of technique. Their ultimate purpose isn't to make you more dangerous to others. That is a side effect, a tool. Their true purpose is to make you less dangerous to yourself and to the world. They forge a certainty so deep and quiet that you no longer feel the need to prove it to anyone. They grant you the clarity to walk away from 99 conflicts, and they provide the precision to end the 100th, the one you cannot avoid, cleanly, efficiently, and without excess, if walking away is taken from you. Mastery, therefore, isn't truly shown in the 7th second of the physical fight. Anyone with training can end a conflict quickly. Mastery is revealed in the 7 minutes of patience, de-escalation, and conscious choice that came before. It is housed in the will to seek a peaceful exit long after the other person has stopped looking for one. I drove home through the sleeping city. My wife was waiting up, reading in the living room. She saw my face as I came in, the slight tightness around the eyes that I couldn't hide, and she knew. "Tell me," she said. So I did. I told her the whole story, from the neon glare of the strip to the flickering hallway and the final quieting thud on the floor. She listened without interruption, her eyes full of understanding, not alarm. When I finished, she was silent for a moment, then reached over and placed her hand on mine. "You did well," she said simply. And that was the only review, the only judgment that ever truly mattered. The bouncer in the club got a story to tell, likely embellished with each telling, but I got to come home. I got to sit in the quiet of my own house, my spirit intact, my conscience clear. No new ghosts had been created that night. That is the way.
Not the way of the warrior, but the way of the human being striving for better. That equilibrium, that hard-won peace is the only thing that ever truly matters.
The philosophy is not in the dramatic finish, but in the quiet moments of choice that lead there. It is in the understanding that the highest form of strength is governed by the deepest form of respect, for your opponent, for the situation, and for yourself. If you found value in this lesson, if it resonated with something within you, I ask you to like this video. It helps this channel grow, allowing us to explore more of these principles. And subscribe to this channel for more journeys into the ideas and moments that shape a meaningful life. The path to mastery, after all, is a path we walk together, one conscious choice at a time. Thank you for listening.